Welcome to the webinar. As mentioned, we're going to learn today how to build your own personalized participation packages. Please let me know if my voice is not loud enough for you. Now, some of you may already be doing something similar for your students and clients, and if so, I really would encourage you today to share your stories and unique participation package ideas with our group in our webinar. First of all, what I'd like you to do is just take a minute or so to check off your role. Now this workshop is particularly geared to those who are new to working with students with complex communication needs or those with severe multiple disabilities. But if you could, I'll give you just a few seconds, maybe 30 seconds to check off your role, and then we will skip to the results. And hopefully most people have had a chance to check off, so I'm going to end our poll. Looks like we have quite a few speech and language pathologists with us today, and also assistive technology, and teachers and special educators as well. So let's move on to our next slide. And I'll just share a little bit about my background. I've been a classroom teacher and also a resource teacher in the past. Also for the last 20 years, worked throughout schools in our province of British Columbia as an outreach consultant. So I worked with a team of therapists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physiotherapists to develop programs for students with severe to profound cognitive and multiple physical disabilities in public schools, private schools, elementary, middle, and high schools. Part of that role also involved being a program coordinator for the BC Ministry of Education outreach program. Currently, over the last few years, and also I am currently Vancouver Island University online instructor. And it's a completely online course, if anyone's interested, called Developing Functional Curriculums, and it's a practicum. So we guide the teachers through activities throughout the entire year. One of the other things that I'm doing currently is I'm a board member and volunteer actually for the Victoria Therapeutic Riding Association, so something which I really enjoy. I've got a suggestion here to please speak a little bit louder, so I will do that. Thanks for that suggestion. Okay, so who is our target audience today? First of all, students, as I mentioned, who perhaps are on modified programs, individuals with severe cognitive disabilities, perhaps individuals with severe multiple physical disabilities, individuals using alternative access devices to participate, switches, etc., and also individuals with complex communication needs, those using alternative voice output to communicate. I also wanted to note that the concept of organization around participation packages can also be adapted to others besides students, perhaps those with advanced stages of dementia. So keep that in mind as well. Some of the learning outcomes for today. It is my hope today that you will take away some of the following. To learn new ways to incorporate switch activities, whether that's leisure, jobs, or in the classroom. I'm hoping that today will get you thinking and increase your creativity, and we'll talk a little bit about becoming a PowerLink detective or a tool detective. Also, I'm hoping that today you will learn how to create comments or questions on voice output devices that are activity specific and promote conversation. I also hope that you will understand the importance of having materials that are ready to go. That's something I think that's crucial to this concept and this idea about getting these packages together ahead of time. Lastly, just being able to expand your curriculum options inside and outside of the classroom. Okay, so let's take a look at a personalized participation package. I've taken 2 photos here to illustrate some of the items that can go into a participation package. We need to include in our package battery-operated or electrical equipment, voice output suggestions specific to the activity, but general enough to be used over again. Also, I find ideas and objects for choice making and ideas for using the PowerLink or spinner that are specific to the individual as well as the activity and also the classmates that are going to be participating with that individual. I find that it's good to package all of the sheets and objects in a clear zippered plastic bag, as you can see here, so that everything is kept together when you need it. One of the things that I have found really useful is collecting those zippered bags that you get your sheet sets in. They're just perfect size, but something generally around that size. You can often collect these through a classroom or a school newsletter. And we once, actually our team, we sent out a request to all the school secretaries in our district and got a great response. So that just gives you a little idea of some of the things where they look outside of the bag and also inside. So let's take a closer look at what can go into a participation package. Now, first of all, I like to take a look at the kinds of communication prompts that I might want for the voice output device. In order to promote conversation, I make sure that I include questions and general comments around the specific activity that will stimulate conversation. I also do some brainstorming to include objects related to the activity so that the individual can practice making choices, whether with reach or gaze or auditory scanning, whatever the person's method of making choices might be. It's good to keep in mind that dollar stores can provide some great ideas for reasonably priced objects. I know school budgets up here in BC are pretty tight. Also, requests for suggested objects can be sent home in a newsletter, or classmates can bring some in to share and help build that participation package. It's really good to get kids involved in that. The other area that I like to have fun doing detective work on is locating participation tools to use with a switch. And here are just a few. You can see here some examples. The spinner overlay should be specific to the leisure activity or classroom activity. And I also look for electrical tools or battery-operated tools that can be switch adapted. For example, a battery-operated coffee stir stick for a coffee club, perhaps in a high school or in a group home situation. Sometimes I get quite crazy with these brainstorming ideas. Another example I'm thinking of is a battery-operated sweater fuzz eater. I know that used to be quite the thing a few years ago, to shave off the sweater fuzzies. And that was actually kind of a fun thing that one of the students did in the hallways. So really think about, you can get quite silly with different tools, building conversation, and have a whole lot of fun with some of these participation packages. So here's just a few suggestions. So why should I bother to prepare a package ahead of time? Here's a few suggestions. I just found myself in working with teaching assistants or educational assistants and teams over the years. Not everyone is able to create questions or comments just on the spot, so it's nice to have a little cheat sheet. Also, educational assistants often need materials that are just ready to go. Here's that recess opportunity. You may only have 10 or 15 minutes. You want to grab that package and have everything there. Also, planned information and suggestions are really great for substitute staff filling in. So again, someone just coming in, everything's kind of together there, the suggestions to put on a voice output device, all the objects for choice making. It's a really handy tool. Just checking on the comments on the side here. Also, I think if there's some change in staff, the routine continues with consistency in language and expectations. And so those things, again, can be pulled into your package. And of course, as educational assistants or teachers, we're always wanting to be facilitators of those relationships with peers. So peers can eventually take over activities as the props are all ready to go. Again, the package is right there. I think lastly, another consideration is that kits can be customized to individual students, their learning objectives, and just updated as progress is made for the student. In short, I think a lot of time can be spent gathering materials, I have found anyways, for an activity if they're just not ready to go. And we can sometimes miss that magic moment and perhaps lose the interest of peers who are not willing to wait around while we're hunting for the materials for the activity. Also, I find that the activity is more likely to occur if it is structured into the day. And again, having that package just makes it a lot easier for that to occur. So let's take a look at what kinds of questions or comments might be created for a brainstorm list. Now, I try to look for open-ended questions or comments that can be reused with different people joining the club or the activity from week to week. So comments that might be instructional, for instance, giving directions in a cooking or a craft activity. Those can be added to your list. Here's some examples here for, you can see they're kind of open-ended. Questions for, say, a manicure kit. Also, it's good to include comments that might be conversational. For example, promoting two-way conversation during a board game or a club. Some examples that come to my mind are, whose turn is it next? Who is in the lead? Careful not to land in jail. Things like that. Or questions in a job when delivering attendance. Again, promoting conversation as part of that participation package. Good morning, Mr. Jones. Student has to wait for a response. How are you today? Again, one of the things they're working on is waiting for a response. Can I have your attendance? Again, you need to wait. Have a good day. Or perhaps your student might provide a different riddle each day when collecting attendance. This last strategy was used at a middle school where I worked, where the entire staff agreed to build this expectation for asking for a riddle into the exchange with the student, as it was explained to everyone that this activity was helping the student to practice conversational skills using a voice output device. Actually, the teacher was very smart, the resource teacher in this situation. She brought this to the attention of the staff at a staff meeting. So I think if staff usually will get on board when they understand the educational rationale and benefits for students. So again, these are just a few examples for a manicure club or whatever you want to call it. But it really is a good idea to look for age-appropriate language, too, when we're identifying our leisure clubs. Okay, let's take a look at some considerations when collecting objects or pictures for choice making. I'm just checking here a comment. Music therapist. Oh, she's given us suggestions. Do you like fast or slow music? That's great. Really great example. Okay, so in taking a look at some of the considerations when we are collecting objects, or for some students they might be working more on pictures for choice making. Real objects are good if they can be used in the activity. Again, pictures, if you might pull together something like a manicure activity board, so you've got conversational pictures, including objects, but also maybe some that relate to a question that is asked to someone else to promote conversation. It's a really good idea to stretch your imagination to include as many objects as possible. And some of the things that I was collecting for our manicure kit that you saw earlier were nail clippers, cuticle trimmers, nail file, hand cream, cuticle softener. I mean, the list can go on and on, actually. Dollar stores are selling peel-off nail jewelry or stickers. So, again, it's a good idea to also check with families and situations with things like manicures and putting things on nails to make sure that it's okay for the student to be able to use something like that. So again, dollar stores are great for these. All of these objects create lots of opportunities for choice making and practicing our IEP skills. Let's take a closer look now at how we can include switch use with either the AbleNet spinner or the AbleNet PowerLink. And you can just see we've got a few examples here for the spinner. So some of the things that we could take a look at again would be which tools to use next, and so maybe some of those could be put on the spinner. Or whose turn to use the nail dryer next, put on different friends' names. Which color to apply next, and some examples here of using the power link and a switch. Again, we could attach it to a nail buffer, nail dryer. If you don't have something fancy like that, just a hair dryer. And actually, I think I've seen callus centers out there that are either battery operated. I'm not sure if there's some electrical ones as well. I became so enthralled with building these packages that I was always on the lookout in department stores, secondhand stores, and even garage sales for interesting but safe electrical tools that I could build a participation package around. Part of becoming a tool detective. Now, we want to make sure that our students are working on their IEP skills within each and every activity, including leisure. So let's take a look at some sample IEP skills here that can be incorporated into our participation package activity. You can see we've got possibility of greetings and farewells. And so again, I like to remind people that doesn't just need to happen at the beginning and the end of the day. If you're starting a new activity, there's new people coming, then that's a nice opportunity for our students to practice those greetings. Of course, making choices. We've got those objects in our kit, using voice output device, and perhaps we've got our list of some open-ended kinds of questions and questions to stimulate conversation. Again, using hands with some of the tools, even if it's hand over hand or hand under hand. Perhaps we built in some sort of mobility as part of the activity. Answering some simple cognitive questions. Should we put up more, use less? Could be involved in colors, numbers. Just working on sustaining a conversation that involves both communication and cognitive IEP skills. And also, I think just following a routine without prompts. I mean, that's something that a lot of our students are working on. I always try to review all of my students' IEP objectives and see if we can work on as many as possible into the participation package. As I mentioned, the greetings and farewells are just so important for sustaining relationships, and we really need to remember not to use them just at the beginning and end of the day. Now, when jotting down ideas for making choices, try to think outside of the box. Remember, it doesn't have to just involve the objects. Like who goes next? Where should we hide this? And that actually reminded me of a story that I wanted to share with you today. I recall a student that I worked with where we were using humor as a motivator to play tricks on people in the classroom, with a resource room, to reinforce her use of auditory scanning. So we offered her choices on 3 levels. First of all, we started with who. Who should we play the trick on today? And we would give her 3 choices. Miss Smith, teacher, Mr. Cairns, another educational assistant in the room, or Bob. And of course, we go back over those again. It was important we made sure that those people who were involved knew ahead of time about the activity because we were going to hide something on them. So, second layer of questions for the student, what should we hide? And again, we gave her 3 choices: a lunch kit, a jacket, a coffee mug. And again, so she would choose with auditory scanning. And then the third layer, we would ask, where should we hide it? And we would give her, again, 3 choices: in the drawer, behind the garbage can, in the closet. As you can see, we were threading in lots of skills, including choice making, cognitive, the W questions, and working auditory scanning in. I have to tell you, the student was so motivated that she pretty well laughed all the way through the entire activity. So she loved this activity, and it certainly helped that her teaching assistant, which was quite often the person we played the prank on, was extremely animated when she was looking for whatever it was that was hidden. Okay. So again, I think it's good for us to keep in mind that when using voice output, we can practice things like pacing, waiting, actual physical skills like hitting the switch, and perhaps we might be working on increasing independence in using hand skills, or another part of the body that has been identified to use for switch access. Within this activity, we may be working on IEP skills such as decreasing hand over hand or hand under hand assistance, or learning to use hands with actual tools in the activity. For instance, pushing a piece of paper towards the teacher on a wheelchair tray to hand out notices to classrooms, if that's one of a job that the student has. Now, mobility objectives can also be worked into the activity, such as using an electric wheelchair to deliver attendance, using a manual wheelchair to hand out materials to classmates in the activity, or perhaps walking independently without any prompts to the office, or using a bike to deliver art materials from the office to the art room. Those are some of the activities that I've definitely had students involved in over the years. We can build in cognitive expectations within the activity, as we can see here, such as answering questions, sorting, matching, even navigating to a destination, and also counting out materials. The list goes on. An important skill, I think, for most students is the ability to sustain a conversation throughout the activity. And this involves both communication as well as cognitive skills. So here we're looking at working on pacing, turn-taking, the ability to ask questions, not just answer questions. And by building these into our participation package, we are building in opportunities for conversation within real and functional activities. So we're not just working on those particular skills in an isolated activity. So I think that's so important. Many IEPs, I find, encourage our students to learn to follow a routine over time, more independently, without too many prompts. This is another advantage, I find, to have a specific package built around an activity or routine. Now, sometimes we see routines or activities where just 1 or 2 objectives are being worked on. We need to incorporate, I think, as many skills as possible, and I've just found that having a participation package helps to pull all these together for the assistant to refer to. So if you are a teacher or an educational assistant, how do you start to pull these ideas together? Well, first of all, I think that it's a good idea to make use of our teams. So start with brainstorming, and brainstorming can occur with the entire class. It's great to get your entire class involved. It can occur also in an IEP meeting, get input from family as well as therapists. Brainstorming can occur in the home, classroom, school at large, and community. Like, just start becoming a detective. And I think also it can occur for those working with adults with special needs in a group home or a seniors facility. So what might some of those activities and participation packages look like if we were looking for a job in a classroom or the school at large? Here we have a few examples, and I'm sure all of you could add quite a few to this list, but these are just a few that I've seen around schools that I visited and some that we have pulled together and developed for students. Again, if I can share a story, I recall working in an elementary school once where I was doing my usual activity detective work, looking around the school for electrical tools when I came across a chalkboard cleaner in the hallway. This was electrical, so it could be plugged into a power link. We checked with the office and the teachers, and this was eventually built into a job for the student to, first of all, collect the brushes from classrooms towards the end of the day using her voice output device to engage in conversation with each class, and as you can imagine, using many other skills involved. Sorting clean versus dirty brushes, counting the brushes, and of course using her switch with the AbleNet PowerLink to run the brush cleaner. Now this machine made quite a bit of noise, so it provided lots of really big sensory feedback for this student, which was a motivator. Comment here from Nancy, one of our participants. She's referring to the hiding story that I shared, that she once hit a spider in her wheelchair, and anyways, it had quite a bit of impact as well. But think about, when we're doing things, I mean, humor is so important for our students. So if we can build that into activities where we can work on choice making and work on comprehension and communication skills, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Now, participation packages are ideal for leisure activities, which can occur at recess or for indoor lunch times or at home. And I find it is always best to get your ideas from age-appropriate peers to create things like clubs that will be of interest to the classmates as well as your students. And it's a good idea also to remember to change it up as the student changes grades. So again, here are just a few examples here. Games club, and again, actually I've done Twister, believe it or not, in middle schools, and actually on time at high schools as well, and the kids get into it. They quite enjoy it. We've used the spinner, of course, with a switch. So anyways, lots of ideas there. Also, we can create participation packages for what I call parallel classroom activities. And I tend to think of two scenarios. First of all, something that the student could do to contribute to the entire class. For instance, we can see here creating paper mache for their art projects, or for instance in a cooking class, particularly at high school, opening maybe being at a station themselves, opening all the cans perhaps with a switch and the power link for the different cooking pods. I would also think of situations where my student might contribute and participate with a smaller group. Now this could either include some children who need extra practice on a skill, such as learning their multiplication facts, or it could be a gifted group of children who are working with a student on an extended learning activity. So again, particularly the latter situation, it's great to be just thinking of things outside of the box. So as we're looking at these two examples here, first of all, we have the student using a switch to make paper mache with a blender for an art project. Again, practicing switch use. One of the IEP skills, making choices about which color to shred next. So there's some communication, cognition skills being practiced. Perhaps delivering the mulched mache to various classmates. Maybe they're using their mobility in their wheelchair for that. Next, posting comments or questions about the project on a voice output device to ask classmates. So as they're moving around the classroom, what are you working on? How is your project coming along? Who will you give your project to? How much more mache do you need? And perhaps using, the student might be using their hands, fine motor skills, with assistance to help clean up the blender afterwards. So we need to remember to involve our students in the beginning, middle, and end of each activity to maximize the participation in our participation packages. In our other example, we have another student using his hands to tap the switch for the spinner. So again, fine motor. Perhaps he is also finding the number that he spins on the communication board or device. So some cognitive skills of matching. He might identify if the last number that he spun is bigger or smaller than the previous one. So some cognition skills there. He could also be counting out a number of objects to match the number spun with classmates as they're working on something more complex, such as three-digit addition questions. So again, we can sort of isolate some specific skills for a student while they're contributing on a higher level, really, to an activity that the rest of the class might be working on. So how do we start building a participation package? Well, as I mentioned before, we need to become tool detectives. I often speak about the importance of being a motivator detective for our students and our clients, and we also need to become great tool detectives. So where do we start? As I mentioned previously, I look for tools in secondhand stores, department stores, and garage sales. Something like a battery-operated copy stir stick from IKEA can become part of a coffee club participation package. So let's look at becoming a tool detective in the classroom. First of all, we might be looking around the classroom for any kinds of electrical equipment. I usually look around a class for things such as electric pencil sharpeners, perhaps a CD player, a fan, anything that I can plug into a power link. And I'm just going to pause for just maybe a few seconds here and ask if any of our participants today have some other examples of electrical classroom equipment that they've been able to pull into an activity or participation package. So I'll give you a minute if you would like to share anything. The watering pick, I have seen students use that to be able to water plants in the classroom. Light. Yes, using it for a light. Very good. Electric toys. A couple of examples. Clip-on fans. Very good. Good ideas. Any other suggestions? A sewing machine. Great. In a home ec class, that would be a great idea. Okay, let's move on. The other thing I like to do is take a look at what kinds of electrical equipment I might be able to find around the school at large. Again, I'm sort of scanning as I'm going through the school. I often ask school secretaries, if I can, for ideas of any electrical tools in the office that could potentially be worked into a participation job. Again, a paper shredder, electric stapler, helping teachers to put packages together. Again, if it can be switch operated by plugging it into the power link. And I've even asked actually school custodians for ideas as well. So expand your resources and get others to join in on the tool detective hunt. Again, I'll just ask for some input from our group today. Anyone else have ideas of some electrical kinds of equipment that has been around either in school offices or around the school at large where you've been able to involve your students? Someone, Jonah here has suggested a camera. Great idea. Any other ideas, things around the school at large? Here you can see the picture of the chalkboard cleaner. I've also, one student that I worked with at a high school, the two secretaries were very accommodating. We worked in their coffee break into a job or a leisure, it's kind of a leisure activity / job because the student came in and helped make their tea. And we used again, the power link for that. Amanda, that's a great idea. Yes, using the AAC device to tell someone to take their turn using the Wii game. So, great ideas. Okay, let's move on. I thought maybe we could take a look at the breakdown of skills and participation for a job which could occur in a classroom or throughout the entire school, such as watering plants. And so again, we can just see the opportunities for communication here, greetings, voice output for this one particular job, hand skills, both using switch, perhaps reaching and touching the soil and seeing whether or not it's dry or wet. Again, some cognitive aspects there. Is the water can full or empty? So lots of IEP skills can be worked into this particular participation package. Finally, let's take another look at the breakdown of skills and participation for a leisure participation package, which could occur at recess, school, or at home with friends or after school. And again, we have an example here with the manicure activity. And as you can see, we've got manicure dryer here, and again, we could pose some cognitive questions as well. So, where do we start? Here are just a few suggestions that work for me. I'm sure you have your own as well. I'd like to start with an environmental scan. So, as a detective, find out which activities routinely need to occur, whether it's I ask that question to the classroom teacher, and then I also ask people around the school, are there some activities that routinely occur in the school at large? There are some activities, sometimes things need to be handed out once a week, perhaps once a month. So do an environmental scan. I like to search out additional equipment through school newsletters, second-hand stores, or internet sites for used equipment. That's also a handy tool. I make sure I have my clear zippered bags, so do a hunt for those. And then I like to brainstorm ideas around the tools I find. Think of all the different ways you could incorporate the tool into different activities. I'd like to finish up today actually by taking a look at some resources too that you might find helpful in your brainstorming. So, some resources. What resources can you draw on for more creative ideas? For using the spinner, PowerLink, and communication tools. The first one I've got here on the left here is Inclusion Outreach has a section called Participation Kits on their website. And it includes lots of ideas for jobs, leisure activities, and modified classroom participation. So you can either go to www.pisp.ca or try Googling participation kits, or here's a link as well that you can use. There's lots of information there. Something else I came across was through the TalkSense website from the UK. There's a nice resource called 106 Ideas for Using a Big Mac. And again, here is the link here. And I'm sure if you just Google some of this key information, you can find the link yourself as well. Of course, AbleNet has some great ideas, as is illustrated here, for using tools with a PowerLink and thinking outside of the box. And so you can find that on the AbleNet Inc. Site. This particular handout actually is that's featured on the right-hand side is called Remarkable Ideas. And the last resource listed here is Glenda's Assistive Technology Information for Spinner Ideas. This has a Canadian resource, and it has a great blog which operates through at classroom.blogspot.ca. So again, those are just a few resources for you. Thank you for your participation today, and I want to thank actually AbleNet for the opportunity to share, and to Gloria for her assistance today. Creating personalized participation packages may seem like a really simple concept, but I think you'll find what a difference it makes to pull these packages together ahead of time so that they are ready to use with tips for educational assistants, classmates, and also respite workers at home. If you have any questions or great ideas you feel like sharing, please feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for your participation.